now I just want to talk briefly about our path tracing here. So if we take a look at our path tracing, we lose the displacement. So obviously now our meshes aren't in the right spot anymore according to the landscape. But we also lose our fog. So we're not really getting as much depth in our scene here. The lighting looks really nice. We'd have to adjust it a little bit to get it to really look the way we want, but it looks very nice. What we want to do here is we want to add our fog back in that we're losing. So the way I'm going to do that is by adding a post-processing volume. So post-process volume, we're going to just take it and drag it out into our scene. And we can use this for a lot of other things as well. There's a lot of different things you can do with the post-process volume, but right now I'm just going to be adding some fog. So what we're going to do is type in infinite, and we're going to check infinite extend. Okay, and that's just going to expand the bounds of our post-process volume so that it encompasses the entire scene. And that's important so that we're not just affecting this little tiny cube right here. And the next thing that we're going to do is search for array. And before we do that, I'm going to minimize this, and we're going to go to our content, and we're going to turn off our filters here. Make a new folder, and we're just going to call it fog material. And we're going to go into this folder. We're going to create a new material, and we're going to call it fog. Okay. And what we can do now is go over here to our post-process volume, and we're going to click this little plus button to add an array element to our post-processing material area here. And we're going to click on choose, and we're going to go to asset reference. Okay. And that's going to allow us to just take this and drag it right over here into our asset reference. It's not going to do anything because we haven't actually created the material yet. So if we go into our material here, what we can do is click on this, and we're going to go down here, and we're going to set the material domain down to post-process. And that's going to only affect the emissive color because that's what our post-processing volume is going to be affecting. And that's really all we want to be affecting with our material here. In our details panel, we're going to search for blendable material or blendable location, sorry. And we're going to change this from after tone mapping to before tone mapping. You're not really going to notice anything at the moment, and you won't notice anything in path tracing mode. However, if you switch back to lit mode, you will see objects kind of vibrating in your scene, and it doesn't look good. You know, when I first used this method, I was having that happen in lit mode. It wasn't happening in path tracing, but it was very annoying. I couldn't figure it out. So be sure that you change this to before tone mapping so that you're not going to get that weird glitch going on. Alright, so we're going to get into the actual creation of our material now. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is add a depth fade. Right click and type in depth, and that'll come up right there. We want to set these parameters. This is essentially going to control the opacity and transparency of our fog. Hold S and click, and that's going to give us a scalar parameter. And I'll just call this opacity, and hold S and click again, and we're going to call this one fade distance. Okay, and then we can take this one and put it into there, take this one and put it into there. And these parameters are just going to allow us to simply control the opacity and the fade distance of our fog. So I'm going to set this default value to 0.3. You know, that's just going to give us some fairly transparent fog, which is what we want. Maybe I'll set this to like 1,000 just to start off, see what happens. It's kind of one of those trial and error things once again with this. But the next thing that we want to do is create a lerp node. So I'm just going to hold L and click, and that's going to create a lerp node for us. And we don't want these values. We want to plug in our own values. So what we'll do is take this and plug it into the alpha, because that's going to control the alpha of our fog. Add our color into the B slot of our lerp node. So what we're going to do is right click, and we're going to type constant for vector. That's going to allow us to input a color, and we can just go over here, click on this, and I'm going to make my fog white because it's usually the color of fog, at least for our scene. I might modify that later, make it a little blue maybe or something like that, but for now that'll be good. Now in our A slot, right click, scene texture. We're just going to go down here and click on scene texture. Go over here, and for our scene texture ID, we're going to change this from scene color down to post-process input 0, and that's going to use our post-processing volume. So now we can take the color of this and put it into our A slot. Okay, so we're blending the scene texture output from here with this white solid color that we've created. And then we're using the alpha of this depth fade, which we've specified the opacity and the fade distance in these nodes right here. So then we're just going to take that and drag it into our emissive color, and we can hit save. And now if we go into our scene, we can see that it has updated and we now have fog in our scene in path tracing mode. So if we go into our fog material here, we can maybe start the fade distance to like 5,000, for example. Click apply. Let's set this to like 15,000. What I might do is increase this to something like, 0.4, and we'll go down to our fade distance and maybe decrease this to something like 13,000. There we go. So now we're getting some better results that I'm liking a little more. We can always modify that later. But then if you go back into lit mode, you will see that if we turn off our exponential height fog that we had turned on, now we still have our fog in our scene. So we have it in both lit and path tracing modes, which is pretty nice.